I never imagined that a wedding reception could become the moment I chose between my son's happiness and the truth that would either save him or break him. My name is Dorothy Calloway. I am 62 years old. I spent 30 years as a school librarian in Knoxville, Tennessee. I raised 2 children mostly on my own after my husband passed, and I built a life that was small but honest. I want to tell you what happened at my son's wedding. And I want to be very clear about something from the start. I did not go to that reception planning to destroy anyone. But when a man picks up a microphone and uses it as a weapon against your child, you have 2 choices. You sit down and stay quiet, or you stand up and tell the truth. I chose the truth, and it shattered everything. My son Marcus is 30 years old. He teaches history at a high school and coaches the junior varsity football team. He drives a 7-year-old truck, rents a 2-bedroom apartment, and every Friday he calls me to talk about whatever book he finished that week. He is not rich. He never pretended to be. He has the kind of quiet dignity that some men spend their whole lives chasing and never find. When he told me last January that he had met someone special, I could hear it in his voice before he even said her name. Mom. Her name is Claire. She's a physical therapist. She's funny, and she's smart, and she doesn't take anything too seriously, except the things that actually matter. I asked him how long they had been seeing each other. About 4 months. I want you to meet her. Can I bring her for Sunday dinner? Of course, I said. Of course. Claire arrived that Sunday with a pan of homemade cornbread and the easiest smile I had ever seen on a young woman. She helped me set the table without being asked. She asked about the photos on my wall and actually listened when I told her who was in them. I liked her within the first hour. By dessert, I loved her. But when she mentioned her father, something shifted in her voice. It was subtle. The way a person goes just slightly quieter when they arrive at a door they are not sure they want to open. My dad is very involved, she said carefully. He has opinions about everything. He's always been that way. What does he do? I asked. He owns 3 car dealerships across East Tennessee. Whitfield Auto Group. You've probably seen the billboards I had. Richard Whitfield's face was on billboards all over the county. Big smile, American flag behind him, the slogan, "Where honest deals are made." He also chaired the board of a local veterans charity called the Valor Fund. His name was on the back of the program at every community event. The kind of man who made sure everyone knew how generous he was. Does he know about Marcus? I asked her. She looked down at her cornbread. Not yet. I'm gonna tell him. I just need to find the right moment. I nodded. But something small and cold settled in my chest. 4 months later, Marcus called me looking serious. He met Claire's dad. How did it go? Silence for a moment. Then he asked me how much I made, what my retirement plan looked like, whether I owned property. He asked if I had any investments. And what did you say? The truth. I told him I earn enough. I save what I can. I don't own a house yet, but I work hard and I love his daughter. What did he say to that? Marcus paused. He said, well, son, Claire has been raised a certain way. She has expectations. A good life costs money, and I hope you understand what you'd be getting yourself into. I thanked Marcus for telling me, and after I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Something about Richard Whitfield bothered me in a way I could not name yet. It was not just the arrogance. Plenty of men with money are arrogant. This felt different. It felt like the particular confidence of a man who has never been caught. Marcus proposed to Claire in October. She said yes. They called me together, laughing, talking over each other, and I cried the happy tears a mother saves for that exact moment. But that same night, alone in my bedroom, I looked out at the dark street and thought, that man is going to try to ruin this. And I believed it the way you believe things you cannot yet explain. I was right. 2 weeks after the engagement, Claire came to see me alone. She sat at my kitchen table and told me her father had announced at dinner that Marcus was not suitable for her. That he had done some research, his word, on Marcus's finances and found them troubling. That he felt Claire was making an emotional decision and not a practical one. "And your mother?" I asked. My mother agreed with him. She always agrees with him. I reached across the table and took her hands. "Claire, you are 30 years old. This is your life." She nodded. "I know. And I'm going to marry Marcus with or without his blessing, but he controls so much, Mrs. Calloway. He'll cut me off completely. He told me he would." "From what?" "From the money he gives me every month. From the house they bought that I live in. He said if I go through with this, he's done helping me financially." I squeezed her hands. "Then let him be done. You have a career. Marcus has a career. You'll build something real." She wiped her eyes. She straightened her spine. I could see the decision settling into her the way decisions do when a person finally stops being afraid. "I'm going to fight," she said, and she did. She told her father the wedding was happening and that was final. Richard Whitfield, faced with losing his daughter entirely, agreed to accept Marcus. But I knew men like him. Agreement is not the same as acceptance. And acceptance is not the same as surrender. The wedding was set for the following June. Richard immediately announced that he would pay for everything and that the reception would be held at the Whitfield family's country club. Marcus was uncomfortable with this, but did it for Claire. I watched my son swallow his pride over and over in those months, and each time it cost him something I could not name. Then one Saturday afternoon in early March, I was driving home from the grocery store when I stopped at a red light near the Riverside Hotel. I glanced toward the entrance and I saw Richard Whitfield walking out with a woman who was not his wife. She was younger, maybe late 30s, with dark hair and 2 small children holding her hands. Richard crouched down and kissed one of the children on the forehead. The boy called him Daddy. The light turned green. I drove away and I could not feel my hands on the steering wheel. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment complex for 20 minutes before I could move. The next morning, I started looking into Richard Whitfield. I want to be honest about this part. I'm a retired librarian. I spent 30 years teaching people how to find information. But I also knew that what I suspected was serious enough that I needed someone with professional skills. A colleague whose husband had gone through a difficult divorce 2 years earlier gave me the name of an investigator named Gene Haverstock. He had an office above a print shop on Market Street. I called him on a Tuesday morning. He was a quiet man in his mid-50s with reading glasses on a cord around his neck and a yellow notepad on his desk. He listened to everything I told him without interrupting. He wrote down the name Richard Whitfield. He wrote down the name of the hotel. He asked for a photograph. "I have the one from the Valor Fund annual gala," I said, pulling up the image on my phone. "He wears a tuxedo in it. He looks very proud of himself." Jean almost smiled. "How soon is the wedding?" 14 weeks. "Then I need to get started." His rate was $2,000 a week plus expenses. It was more than I had budgeted for anything that year. I paid it without hesitating because some things you cannot put a price on, and your child's dignity is one of them. The following week was the longest of my life. Marcus came for dinner twice and talked about honeymoon plans and whether to put a ceiling fan in the spare bedroom, and I smiled and nodded and carried my secret the way you carry something fragile and dangerous with both hands, never setting it down. Gene called me on Friday afternoon. He asked me to come to his office. I climbed those stairs faster than I should have at my age. He had a folder on his desk and he turned his monitor toward me before I even sat down. "Richard Whitfield has a second family," he said. "The woman's name is Pamela Greer. She's 39. She works in the accounting department of Whitfield Auto Group. They have been together for at least 6 years. The children are his, a boy who is 7 and a girl who just turned 5. He pays for their house in Maryville. He pays for the children's private school. He pays for the children's private school. He pays for everything." "How?" I asked. Jean opened the folder. "With money from the Valor Fund." I felt the air leave the room. "He's the board chair of a veterans charity. He was the board chair, Jean said. He has been systematically diverting donations for years. He set up a management company that the charity pays for, quote, administrative services. That company exists on paper only. The money flows directly to a personal account he controls. We're talking about over $800,000 over 5 years. I put both hands flat on the desk to steady myself. There are also 6 families of veterans who applied for emergency housing grants through the Valor Fund. Grants that were approved, money that was never sent. The families still don't know why their funding fell through. One of those families lost their home because of it. A veteran's family lost their home. I could not speak. There's more, Jean said. His dealerships have been cited twice for odometer fraud by the State Consumer Protection Office. One case was settled quietly. The second is still open. And he has a personal tax lien from 2 years ago that he has not resolved. He is not in financial trouble yet, but the charity investigation has been referred to the State Attorney General's office. From what I understand, they are moving toward an arrest within the next few months. I drove home that afternoon in complete silence with a copy of Jean's folder on the passenger seat. I thought about the veterans who applied for help and got nothing. I thought about the family that lost their house. I thought about Pamela Greer and those 2 children growing up in a house paid for with stolen money. I thought about Claire's mother, a quiet woman I had met twice, who always sat slightly apart from her husband at events, who smiled at things a full second after everyone else. The way a person smiles when they learned long ago to perform happiness on a delay. And I thought about Marcus, my son who asked nothing of the world except to live honestly and be treated with the basic dignity that honest people deserve. I made a decision that night. I would not say anything before the wedding. I would wait. I would watch. And if Richard Whitfield used that microphone as I was certain he would, I would be ready. I spent the next week making copies of everything. I prepared 3 envelopes, one for Marcus, one for Claire, one for Claire's mother. I put them in my good handbag and I set the handbag by the front door where I would not forget it on the wedding day. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Richard Whitfield asked to speak with me privately at the rehearsal dinner. We were in the sitting room off the main hall of his house, which was enormous and decorated with the specific kind of taste that announces its own expense at every turn. He closed the door and remained standing while I sat, a small, deliberate choice I noticed immediately. "Dorothy," he said, "I want to speak to you plainly." "Please do," I said. "Marcus is a fine young man, simple, modest. He's going to give Claire a very ordinary life. And I want you to understand that I am going to be present. Financially present. Financially present. Which means I am going to have a say in how they live." I looked at him for a long moment. I said, "Marcus has never needed anyone to have a say in how he lives. He manages that quite well on his own." Richard smiled. It was the smile of a man who had never once considered that someone across from him might know more than he did. "I want us to be on the same page," he said. "That's all." I stood up. "We are not on the same page," I said quietly. "But I suspect we will be very soon." I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not concern. Just a small adjustment, like a thermostat clicking on. He opened the door and I walked out and rejoined the dinner, and I did not speak to him again that evening. The night before the wedding, Marcus came over for dinner. He was nervous and happy in equal measure, talking too fast and laughing at things that were not quite jokes. I made his favorite, chicken with gravy and biscuits, and I watched my son and thought about every year it had taken to get him to this moment. He had been a serious little boy who checked out library books on subjects nobody his age cared about. Ancient civilizations, weather systems, the history of the American labor movement. He grew into exactly the kind of man those books would have predicted. Thoughtful, steady, committed to things that matter. "Mom, Mr. Whitfield mentioned he has a speech prepared. A long one." "I know," I said. Marcus looked at me. "Are you okay?" "You've been a little quiet lately." "I'm fine, son. Just tired." He hugged me at the door when he left. I'll see you tomorrow. Yes, I said. You will. I did not sleep much that night. The ceremony was held at 11 in the morning at a small Episcopal church downtown. Claire walked in on her father's arm in a dress that was beautiful and simple, and I saw Marcus at the altar, and his face did something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. It was not just love. It was recognition. The specific look of a person who has found the one place they feel entirely known. I cried through the whole ceremony, and I was not ashamed of it. The reception began at 2 o'clock at the Whitfield Country Club. The room held 250 people. Round tables with white linens, centerpieces with cream and pale blue flowers, a parquet dance floor, a bar with open service, a stage with a podium and a microphone at the front. From where I sat, I could see Richard Whitfield working the room the way a politician works a fundraiser. Shaking hands, leaning in to laugh at things people said to him, touching elbows, making every person feel briefly important. I watched him and I thought about the veterans who never got their grants, and I tightened my hands in my lap and I waited. Dinner was served and cleared. The cake was cut. The first dance happened. Marcus and Claire moved across the floor to an old Nat King Cole song, and for those 3 minutes, everything in the room was exactly what it was supposed to be. Then the MC tapped the microphone and announced that the bride's father had some words he would like to share. Richard Whitfield walked to the podium with the unhurried confidence of a man who has never once worried about whether a room would receive him well. He adjusted the microphone slightly, even though it did not need adjusting. He smiled at the crowd. He thanked everyone for coming. Now, he said, I have to be honest with you all tonight, because that is who I am. An honest man. There was warm laughter. He waited for it to settle. Claire has always been my greatest achievement. From the day she was born, I knew she was exceptional. Beautiful, brilliant, capable of anything. He paused. So when she told me she had chosen Marcus, I'll admit I had some concerns. The laughter that followed was nervous. I saw Marcus's jaw tighten slightly. Claire was still smiling, but her eyes had changed. Marcus is a school teacher, Richard continued. Nothing wrong with that? Noble work, I'm sure. He looked directly at Marcus with the smile of a man delivering something wrapped in good manners. My daughter could have had her choice of anyone. Doctors, business owners, men with real careers and real prospects. But she chose a school teacher who drives a pickup truck from 2017. He chuckled. That's my Claire, always the idealist. Some of the guests laughed. Some looked at their plates. Marcus looked at the tablecloth. I saw his shoulders drop exactly 1 inch, and I saw it happen, and I felt something complete inside me, and it was not rage. It was clarity. I want to toast my daughter, Richard said, raising his glass. To her beauty, her stubbornness, and her apparently bottomless optimism that a man without ambition can somehow keep up with her. The room started to applaud. I was already standing. I picked up my handbag. I walked toward the stage at a pace that was not hurried because I did not need to hurry. I had been ready for this for months. Richard saw me coming when I was about 10 feet away, and the smile on his face shifted into something uncertain. Mrs. Calloway. I stepped up onto the stage. I placed my hand on the microphone. He held on for 1 second and then he let go, which is what men like him do when they are caught off guard. They let go. Excuse me, I said into the microphone. My name is Dorothy Calloway. I am Marcus's mother. The room was very quiet. A few minutes ago, Mr. Whitfield called my son unambitious. He implied that Marcus isn't good enough for his daughter. He said this in front of 250 people at his own child's wedding. My voice was steady. I had not known until that moment how steady it would be. So I want to say something in response. Marcus is the most honorable person I have ever known. He works hard. He keeps his word. He has never once taken something that did not belong to him. I looked at Richard Whitfield. I wish I could say the same for everyone in this room. Richard stepped forward. Dorothy, this is not the time. I reached into my handbag. You're right that I've had concerns about this marriage, I said. But they weren't about Marcus. They were about you, and so for the past several weeks, I had you investigated. The room went very still. I removed the folder from my handbag and held it up. Richard Whitfield has a second family, a woman named Pamela Greer and 2 children, a son who is 7 and a daughter who is 5. He has been supporting them for 6 years. He pays for their home. He pays for their schooling. And he has been paying for all of it with money stolen from the Valor Fund. There were gasps. Someone at a front table stood up. I recognized him as a member of the Valor Fund board. The Valor Fund, I continued, is the veterans charity Mr. Whitfield chairs, the one he accepts awards for, the one whose name is on plaques in his office. Over the past 5 years, more than $800,000 in donations meant for veterans and their families has been redirected through a fake management company into a personal account controlled by Richard Whitfield. There are 6 veteran families who applied for emergency housing grants that were approved and never funded because that money was stolen. One of those families lost their home. Dorothy, stop it right now. Richard moved toward me. A man near the stage, I later learned he was one of the veterans on the charity's advisory council, stepped into the aisle. Let her speak, he said. Let her finish. I placed a stack of copies on the edge of the stage. The bank statements are here. The wire transfers. The incorporation papers for the shell company. The case numbers from the State Consumer Protection Office for the odometer fraud at his dealerships, and the copy of the referral made to the Attorney General's office, which I understand will result in charges within the next few months. People were standing. Some were moving toward the stage copies. The board member I had recognized was on his phone already. Richard was no longer looking at me. He was looking at the room, and what he saw in it was the thing he had spent his entire adult life trying to prevent. He saw that people knew. Claire's mother had both hands pressed over her mouth. Claire was standing at the edge of the dance floor with Marcus's arms around her, and she was crying. Marcus was looking at me with an expression I could not fully read. It was not anger, not yet. It was something more complicated than anger. I set the microphone back on the podium. My son is not unambitious, I said. He simply chose to build his life on things that are real. I looked at Richard one final time. I cannot say the same for the man who just tried to humiliate him. I stepped down from the stage. What happened next was not like the movies. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match, no single moment of reckoning. What happened was slower and messier than that. People clustered in small groups talking urgently. The board member stepped outside with his phone and did not come back in. 2 of Richard's business associates walked out without speaking to anyone. Claire's mother sat perfectly still in her chair with her hands in her lap, as though she had been expecting this moment for years and had finally been given permission to stop pretending otherwise. Richard left within 20 minutes. He walked out through a side door with the posture of a man who has somewhere else to be, which is what cowards tell themselves when they flee. I found Marcus sitting alone at a corner table. He was staring at the centerpiece. Son, he looked up. His eyes were dry and very dark. Is all of it true? Yes. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You could have told me. I sat down across from him. I know. I thought about it every day for months. But every time I almost did, I thought about what it would do to you before you had a chance to be happy. I was wrong about that. I should have trusted you. You made that decision for me, Mom. Yes, I did, and I'm sorry. But I need you to understand something. I was not going to sit there and watch that man humiliate you in front of 250 people and do nothing. Not after everything I found out. Not after what he's done to those families. Marcus lipped at the table. Then he looked at me. I know, he said quietly. I know. Claire came to us. Her makeup was gone. Her hair had come partly down from its pins. She looked nothing like the composed bride who had walked down the aisle 3 hours earlier, and she looked more beautiful for it. in the way that people are most beautiful when they are entirely themselves. She sat next to Marcus and took his hand. She did not say anything to me for a long moment. Then she said, "How long have you known?" "About 8 weeks." She closed her eyes. "You knew on Easter." "We all had dinner together on Easter." "Yes." She breathed slowly. "I understand why you waited. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I understand it." She looked at Marcus. "Are we okay?" Marcus looked at her for a long time. "Yeah," he said. "We're okay." Claire's mother found me near the coat check as people were leaving. She was pale and very composed in the way of a woman who had practiced composure for so long it had become structural. "The things you said," she told me, "were they documented?" "All of it is in the envelope in your purse," I said. "I gave it to you with your coat." She looked down at her hands. "I had suspicions," she said, "for years. But I told myself I was imagining things. You weren't." She was quiet for a moment. "I know." She looked at me with an expression I recognized because I had worn it myself in different circumstances. The look of a person who has just been released from something very heavy. "Thank you," she said. "I know it doesn't feel that way right now. But thank you." She walked out with her sister, and I watched them go, and I thought about all the years that woman had spent in a house built on lies, and I did not feel satisfaction. I only felt a deep, aching sadness for the time she could not get back. The drive home that night was quiet. I sat in my living room until almost midnight with a cup of tea going cold on the table beside me. I thought, was it worth it? I thought, will my son forgive me? I thought, those veterans' families, that family that lost their house, they deserve to know what happened to their money. And I thought about Richard Whitfield standing at that microphone with his assembled smile and his borrowed prestige, calling my son unambitious in front of everyone who was supposed to be celebrating him. And I knew the answer. Whatever came next, I would live with it, because the alternative was living with having done nothing. And that was the one thing I could not survive. Marcus did not call me for 3 weeks. I left messages, I sent texts. I drove past his apartment once and saw his truck in the lot and sat at the end of the block for 10 minutes before I drove away. I understood. He needed time that was not on my schedule. His grief was his own. The state attorney general's office filed charges against Richard Whitfield 7 weeks after the wedding. The Valor Fund fraud, the shell company, the veterans' grants. It was in the Knoxville paper, and then in the Nashville paper, and then briefly in the national news, because a charity founder stealing from veterans is a story that travels. Richard was released on bail, and his face was on a different kind of billboard, the kind that runs below the news ticker. Claire called me the day the charges were filed. "My mother has decided to file for divorce," she said. She seemed calm. Not happy, not sad. Settled. "How are you doing? Honestly?" "Better than I expected." She paused. "We found out about Pamela, my dad's other family. My mother and I went to meet her last week. I didn't know what to say." "She didn't know he was married either," Claire said. "He told her he was separated, that the divorce was almost final. She waited 6 years. She had his children. She was lied to the same as everyone else." She took a breath. "Her kids are my half-siblings. I don't know what that means yet. But they're not responsible for any of this. They're just kids." "That is a remarkable thing you just said," I told her. "I don't feel remarkable. I feel like I've been living in a house and I just found out the whole foundation was fake." She was quiet for a moment. "But at least now I know what I'm standing on. That's something." Marcus called me on a Sunday evening in the 4th week. "Just, Mom." In his voice from when he was 12 and had broken something and needed to explain himself. "Son, can I come over?" "Of course." He sat at my kitchen table the same way he had sat there as a child and as a teenager and as a college student home for holidays. I put coffee in front of him and I sat across from him and I waited. "I spent a lot of time angry at you," he said. "And then I spent some time thinking about why you did it. And I talked to Claire a lot." He wrapped both hands around his mug. And I want to say something, Mom, and I need you to let me get through it without interrupting. Okay, you made a decision that was mine to make. You kept something from me for weeks that I had a right to know. And there is a part of me that is still angry about that, and I think that is fair. He looked up at me. But I have thought about every moment of the past year, and I have thought about what kind of man Richard Whitfield was, and I have thought about what you saw in him that I did not let myself see because I was so focused on Claire, and I have thought about those veterans whose money was stolen. He paused. And the truth is, Mom, I don't think you had a bad reason. I think you were scared of losing me, and scared of being wrong, and scared of all of it, the same as I am scared of things sometimes. And I think you did something imperfect for a right reason, and I think that is what being a parent sometimes looks like. I was very careful not to cry. I forgive you, he said. And I need you to forgive me for the past 3 weeks. There is nothing to forgive. He came around the table and hugged me, and I held on. The second wedding happened 6 months later. Claire and Marcus got married in a small ceremony in the garden of a friend's house in East Tennessee. 31 people. Folding chairs and string lights, and Marcus's old Nat King Cole record on a speaker, someone propped on a porch rail. Claire wore a different dress, simpler, white cotton, and she was more beautiful than she had been the first time because this time there was nothing in the room that did not belong. When Marcus danced with me, he said, I've been thinking about what you said at the reception. I don't remember exactly what I said. You said he built his life on things that weren't real. He looked at me over my shoulder as we turned. I've been thinking about what I want to build. Claire and I have been talking about it. I put in for a transfer to a school district that has a better literacy program, something that actually matters. I held my son's hand and thought about the small, serious boy who used to check out library books on subjects nobody his age cared about. That boy became a man who knows exactly what is worth caring about. I cannot take credit for that. But I can say I am grateful that I raised him somewhere he was allowed to find it out. Richard Whitfield pled guilty to 4 counts of fraud and 2 counts of embezzlement 11 months after the charges were filed. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. The Valor Fund was dissolved and the assets that could be recovered were distributed to the veteran families who had been defrauded. The family that had lost their home received a settlement that helped them find a new one. I learned about this through Gene Haverstock, who had kept in touch. He sent me a short message, thought you'd want to know. I sat with that information for a long time. 7 years is not enough for what Richard Whitfield took, not from the veterans, and not from Claire, and not from her mother, and not from those 2 children he had with Pamela, who were going to grow up explaining their father to people for the rest of their lives. But it was something. It was the world saying, this was wrong, and we are saying so formally. That matters more than people realize, especially to the people who were told for years that no one would believe them. Claire's mother sold the big house. She moved into a smaller one near her sister in Chattanooga. The last time I saw her, she was learning to make pottery. She held up a lopsided bowl she had made and laughed at it with the uncomplicated laughter of someone who has recently been given back their own life and is still getting used to how light it feels. It was one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. Pamela moved her children to another city and started over. Claire reached out to her eventually. They met for coffee once. I do not know what they said to each other, and it is not mine to know. But I know that Claire came home from that meeting and told Marcus she thought the children should know they had a half-sister if they ever wanted to. Marcus said that was a good idea. That is the kind of people my son and daughter-in-law are. They build things wider than they have to. Claire is pregnant now. A girl, due in April. They have not decided on a name yet, and I have not offered suggestions because that is not my business. But Marcus told me on the phone last week that Claire has been talking about family names, about what names mean, about what you give a child when you give them a name that connects them to someone who came before. I did not say anything, I just listened. That is also what being a parent sometimes looks like. There is something I want to say to whoever is listening to this story. Wherever you are right now, You may be facing a version of what I faced. Someone in your life who uses power or money or the appearance of success to make other people feel small. Someone who counts on the good manners of honest people to protect their dishonesty. Someone who banks on your silence. I want to tell you that I was 61 years old when I stood up at that reception. I was a retired librarian who drove a 12-year-old car and had never once in my life thought of myself as someone who stood up in front of crowds. I was terrified. My knees were shaking underneath that podium, and I do not think a single person in that room could see it. But I also knew this. I had the truth. I had the documents. And I had 30 years of watching what happens to families that are built on lies. They do not survive intact. They survive in pieces, the way things that have been broken survive, which is to say, changed forever, carrying the shape of what they were, even as they become something new. I chose to be the one who broke it. I would make the same choice again, not because it was comfortable or clean or because I was certain it would work out. I was not certain. I did not know that my son would forgive me. I did not know that Claire would find her way to something better. I did not know that the Attorney General's office would actually move on the case. I only knew that silence would protect no one except the man who had already taken enough. That is what I want you to remember. Silence sounds like safety. But most of the time, silence is just the thing we call it when we are afraid. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the people you love is to be afraid and speak anyway. Marcus called me yesterday. Claire is doing well. The nursery is almost finished. He painted it a soft yellow because Claire said yellow is the color of something that is just beginning. He asked if I wanted to come over this Sunday for dinner. I said yes. I will bring cornbread.